Judging feeds comparisons. Comparisons feed judging. The two go hand in hand. It is like a cycle. The more you judge, the more you compare. The more you compare, the more you judge. And it goes and it goes and it goes. And if we do this, we will find that we are constantly assessing other people and how we fall in relation to them. Welcome back to Happiness in Progress. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy Award-winning journalist, a mom, wife, and you know what I like to say, just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. This podcast is brought to you by the Mail Tribune. You can find more podcasts at mailtribune.com. Before we get going on the episode, I want to take a quick minute to remind you to please subscribe. When you subscribe, it not only helps you see the latest episodes, it also helps me. It helps this show and this channel be seen by more people. So if you could, just click that subscribe button. And if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and click the like button as well. All right, let's get to the good stuff. Today we are talking about comparisons. I love this topic. I think this is so important, and I've talked about this in the past. But today I'm going to talk about something a little bit different. Something that I think is at the root of comparisons. Do you want to know what it is? Judgment. It's judgment. It is the fact that so many of us live off of regular judgment. When I was a kid, when I was a teenager, this is a terrible story, and I regret that this is how I felt, but this is how I felt, so I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you. When I was maybe, 13, 14, 15, somewhere in there, I was sitting in this class, and I had a teacher tell us that we needed to get to a point where we were no longer judging the people around us. And keep in mind that I had been moving every other year, and I walked into new schools all the time. I was always the new girl, and I was thinking, what? You want me to stop judging people? How am I going to be able to know where to sit? How am I going to know who's cool to be friends with? How am I going to know who has the highly fashionable clothes and who does the best at this and the best at that? And how am I going to even know how to fit in? I can't not judge people. I told you it was a terrible story, and it is. And it really wasn't until I became an adult, also terrible, but it really wasn't until I became an adult that I realized that this habit of judging people holds us back in so many ways. And today I'm specifically going to talk about how judgment impacts the way not only we see the world, but how we see ourselves. Because that habit of judging everything and everyone is cultivating a habit of comparisons. What I've learned is when we compare, when we judge, we are comparing. Judging feeds comparisons. Comparisons feed judging. The two go hand in hand. It is like a cycle. The more you judge, the more you compare. The more you compare, the more you judge. And it goes and it goes and it goes. And if we do this, we will find that we are constantly assessing other people and how we fall in relation to them. A little bit later on in the episode, I'm going to talk about how sometimes this works for us. Sometimes when we judge someone and compare them to ourselves and we put them down and we are able to use that to make ourselves feel superior, sometimes that works for us. But the habit gets us into a place that when we fall short of the person we're comparing ourselves to, the person we're judging, that doesn't feel as good, does it? No, it doesn't. So we'll get to that in just a minute. I want to tell you a story as vaguely as I can because this person has become a really good friend of mine. But there was somebody who I knew for a long time who I did not get along with. We fought all the time. I blamed her for stuff. She blamed me for stuff. We did not have a good relationship, and it was a type of relationship where we could not see each other every day. So one day, finally, I ended up at a lunch with her, and she opened up about her past and her story, and I did the same with her. And I think for the first time, I looked at her as a person, and I saw her as a human with a complex background and a complex life and reasons for why this was happening and why that was happening. And I saw her for more than just the person I was mad at all the time. And we ended up becoming really close friends. And I wanted to share that. I should have asked her before, because then I could have gone more into the story and told it a little more. But But I wanted to share that just because I think we don't often enough see people as human beings. And the number one way to stop judging a person is by seeing them as what they are, a human being. That's why I like to start the episodes out as like, I'm just a person. And I think that if we approach every relationship that we have and we can see the person as a human being with faults and complex backgrounds and childhoods and things that they're working through, their own traumas, then we can be a little more gentle with them. And one really nice thing about, as we practice that with other people, we actually start to become more gentle with ourselves. We start to give ourselves more grace as we give other people more grace. In the very early days of this podcast, I interviewed someone named Alyssa Parker. If you have not heard that episode, I will link it in show notes. Go back. It is a very powerful one. She lost her daughter in the Sandy Hook shooting. And I wanted to have her on the podcast because she had gone public with this information that she had forgiven the shooter. And I remember being like, wait, what? Again, like, I cannot even imagine forgiving someone who walked into a classroom of little children and shot, I think it was more than 20 of them, including my daughter. Like, I cannot even imagine that being true. And so I asked her about that on the podcast, and she told me that what she realized was that she did not have all of the information to judge him appropriately. She didn't know everything that was going on in his head. She didn't know the shortcomings that he had. And she said that he was doing what he knew with the tools he had. And that she needed to kind of like wash her hands. I think one of the powerful parts of this for her was that she got to wash her hands and not have to hold that judgment with her. She decided to let a higher power, let God do that final judgment, and that she wouldn't have to do that judgment. And when I think about that she was able to forgive a man who took her daughter away from her, who murdered her daughter while her daughter was trying to sit in a classroom and learn. I think what it teaches me, and I hope what you get from this, is that we can do that too. Like, if she can do that, we can do that on a much smaller scale. So anytime it comes with forgiveness and really not judging people, I try to go to what are the tools that they don't have? What are these expectations I'm holding them to that their childhood and their traumas make it impossible for them to reach? When I do that, it makes me be a little bit better prepared to, one, not be judging them, and two, if I need to forgive them, to forgive them. I am going to be real, though. There are still people that I struggle to forgive. I'm not going to pretend that I have forgiven all the people that annoy me, that have wronged me. I haven't. I'm working on it. But I think that tool from Alyssa is so powerful to understand their shortcomings, that they do have shortcomings, that they don't have all the tools that they should have. One of the things I like to do when I talk about this with groups of women is another thing that comes from a Brene Brown book. So she tells people to write down, or if you're driving, think about someone who annoys you, who makes you so mad, who drives you insane. I think her exact words are, fills you with frustration, disappointment, and resentment. Picture the person. I know it's not hard. Think of the person. And now, this is what Brene tells you to do. Imagine they're doing the best they can. It's hard, I know. And when I've said this to groups of women, there's the, oh my goodness, like the understanding of, oh my gosh, yeah, they do have that background. They do have those traumas. They did have the childhood they had, and I'm holding them to a too high of an expectation. And there's that realization and almost like that childlike love that you can start having for that person. Like, picture them as a child, and you just like, your heart grows for them in your understanding of their pain. But there are also the people that say, well, good riddance. And that might be you, and that's okay. But just as a rule, to try to start seeing that person with their faults and understanding that those faults come from somewhere. Understanding that things are holding them back and there's a reason for that. I really believe that we have a responsibility not to hold people accountable for things they don't know and tools they don't have, but instead to teach them, to bring them along with us on this journey of life. So one thing I talk about a lot, and one thing I teach, and one thing I fully believe is that we are all intentionally here. We have a purpose. We're all enough, okay? But yet I am a human who has it hardwired in my mind, go back to that teenage girl whose instinct is to judge, right? So I want to tell you another story that doesn't put me in the most favorable light, but I'm going to tell it anyway. I sat down in a class and I looked across the room and I saw this woman sitting there, someone I didn't know, and instinctively in my head started going, oh, look at that goody two shoes and her outfit and her hair, and I started judging her, even though I'd been doing this work for a couple years to not judge people anymore. And I was like, hold up, Danielle. Why are you judging this woman who has nothing to do with you, who you don't know, who you are just judging this person for no reason? So I think when that comes up, you have to start asking yourself some questions. Like, why? Why are you doing this? And what I realized in that moment was, this isn't about her. This is about me. This is about the fact that I'm sitting in a room that I'm not comfortable in, that I feel a little bit out of place. So I'm trying to prove that there's something wrong with the other people so that I can feel a little bit more comfortable. I think that's human. I think that's okay. I think that as we walk out of that, we can stop that behavior. So that happened to me, and I said, oh my gosh. Realization, number one. And two, like, that woman over there is perfect. Like, she's who she's meant to be. She's beautiful. She has a great outfit. Maybe I'm a little jealous of the outfit. Maybe that's where the judgment came from. But I walked out of that by saying, figuring out why I was doing it, making that realization, and then realizing also that she is enough. So the things to do are, 1, recognize the behavior. 2, ask yourself why. And 3, change the judgment. I don't think the judgment even needs to be out there. I think if you roll that back and start to look at people and realize, hey, we're all just people, I think that's going to be able to get you a lot further in life. As I alluded to at the beginning of the episode, I think it's really easy to make rude comments about people or even have rude thoughts about people to elevate ourselves. You know, whether that's looking at a picture on social media and saying, ooh, that is not taken with good lighting, or ooh, look at the mess in her picture, or whatever it is that you point out and make a judgment on. I think what we're trying to do, whether we know it or not, is to elevate ourselves. And we look at that and say, ooh, I would never. Oh, my pictures are so much better. And then we feel a little bit better. We feel a little bit cooler. And we continue to do this. But the problem is, when it's the other way around, when we're looking on all those perfect squares and there's nothing to find fault with, all of a sudden the fault lies with us. All of a sudden, that habit of comparison is going. That habit of judgment is going, and we can't stop it. And before you know it, we just feel bleh. And the reason is because we've put ourselves in a habit of constant judgment, in constant comparison, and that's what our mind knows how to do. But now we're looking at perfection. We are looking at filtered, beautiful photos. And what happens? We're not elevating ourselves. We're falling because we're comparing ourselves now to something that we think is better than us. None of it is good. Comparing yourself to elevate yourself or comparing yourself to feel bad about yourself, none of that is healthy for you. I want to wrap up with one of my favorite quotes. This is from C.S. Lewis. I have shared it before, so it might sound familiar. He says, quote, "Pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more of it than the next man. It is the comparison that makes you proud, the pleasure of being above the rest. Once the element of competition is gone, pride is gone." End quote. We compare ourselves to other people worse off than us so we can feel better. But the reality is the practice of comparison, the practice of judgment will make us feel bad about ourselves when we're not as far as somebody else. We have to stop it. And I know that it's going to be hard, especially if you grew up making judgments about people, especially if this has been a practice in your life. This is not just a switch that you can go on, off. This is probably generations old, is my guess. So just start with the simple rules of 1, recognizing the behavior. When you start judging someone, say, oh, okay, I'm judging someone. 2, ask yourself why. Why do I feel this need right now to judge that person? And 3, fix the judgment. I really think that last part is important because you can start putting yourselves all on the same playing field as everyone else. I mean, we really are all just people. We're just people. And with that, I want to remind you, I have put the other comparison episodes, their links in show notes, and I want to thank you for being here on Happiness in Progress.